I was going to show you this video, but maybe that's a little bit too time-consuming. Just making it like to the point. In Greenpeace, we have got three principles. One principle is taking action. Another principle is that we are politically independent. And another principle is that we are financially independent. Now, what do we mean by taking action? Like I said, basically our main objective is to protect the environment, to protect the earth as it is. And we want to keep the world able to nurture life as such, right? So we know that there are a number of environmental problems. We know that there is climate change. Let's do that, also check again. Who has heard about climate change? Okay, that's interesting. That's about more than half of the room. So climate change is basically an environmental problem whereby the planet is becoming warmer and warmer. And the reason for that is that we have got something that is called greenhouse gases. And the greenhouse gases are getting more and more accumulated. And that is creating, for example, there we have got a photograph that is in the North Pole. And the North Pole and the South Pole are melting faster and faster and faster because of climate change. I'm not going to go into the details of what climate change is about. Let's talk about another environmental problem, deforestation. Who knows what deforestation is? Deforestation. Okay, that's kind of more than half of the room. Basically, deforestation is that we are losing the forests that we have got in the planet. So that's another good example of an environmental problem that we're working on. But then, coming back to this. So, when we do take action, taking action basically means that we bear witness to change government policy and to mobilize millions of people through digital activism. Our principle is non-violence at all times. So when we take action, we basically go to the source of the problem and we expose that problem. I'm going to go into more detail afterwards as to how we do it, just for you to get a picture as to what taking action actually means. But let me talk about this principle that means to be politically independent. It means that we as an organization, we don't have any permanent bonds with the government, not with companies. Because effectively, the reason why we have got the environmental problems that we have got at the moment is because of the policies that we have got, both from the corporate world and from the governments. So we want to be independent in order to be able to say, this is wrong, and this has to change. And the same goes when it comes to financially. The resources that we get are only from individuals. So we don't get resources from companies, we don't get resources from the government whatsoever. We only get donations from individuals as such. So that allows us also to be independent financially and be able to point out to the environmental problems and to the causes behind it. So what do we do? Like I said, it is about protecting the environment. And there are a number of big environmental problems that we address. One of them is agriculture. Nowadays we have got, for example, the bees. They are disappearing at a very high rate. The bees are essential for cross-pollination, and that's basically being able to make the plants reproduce. So if we didn't have bees, we wouldn't have agriculture. We wouldn't have fruits. We wouldn't have many kinds of vegetables. So when it comes to sustainable agriculture, what we are campaigning for is that agriculture becomes as organic as possible. We know that there is a need for pesticides to be able to control plagues and to be able to have good production of agricultural products. But what we are working on putting forward is that we want to have as least as possible usage of pesticides, for example. What you have got here in this slide is that we are trying to ban the neonicotinoid and the GMOs, that is genetically modified organisms. So we're working in the agriculture campaign to prevent these from being the normal practice. Especially here in Japan, the standard for neonicotinoid, for pesticides, is really, really high. So the tolerance that the government has got on pesticides is higher than the European Union and is higher than in the US. Then we have got also the energy campaign. The energy campaign has got, as a main element, as you may have heard, we have got the Fukushima disaster almost more than 3 years ago already. And it is almost 1 year that all the nuclear power plants in Japan have been offline. So basically, in the energy campaign, what we are doing is to promote renewable energies and to show that there are alternatives to nuclear energies. Simply put. So essentially what we are working on is that we are trying to mobilize consumers to promote renewable energy so that by 2016 the market is going to be liberalized. Have you heard about that? From 2016 you're going to be able to make the choice as to what electricity provider you want to use. Nowadays, if you live in Tokyo, you have no other choice than TEPCO. TEPCO is your only choice to receive electricity. So from 2016 onwards, you as a consumer are going to be, for the first time, be able to make the choices as to who you want to purchase electricity from. So you're going to be able, the people that are aware about the nuclear problem, and the people who want to make the choice for renewable energies, they're going to be, for the first time, able to say, I want renewables. So we're going to be working also when it comes to that. And we have got the vision that within our lifetime, we're able to see a Japan that is 100% on renewable energies. So that is the ultimate objective of our energy campaign. Then we have got the seafood sustainability work. This is what we call our oceans campaign. And here I have a few facts to share with you. Japan alone consumes 80% of the non-canned tuna. So, who likes sushi? Enjoy it for the time being, because if things continue like it is now, you might not be able to eat any longer sushi in 20 years. So that is why we need to have sustainable seafood. Basically what is happening now is that we are overfishing the oceans and we're not giving time for the fishes to reproduce. So the amount of tuna is decreasing very rapidly. Actually, some species of tuna are already endangered species. Then we have got also another species like the eel. You may have heard this in the news last year, especially when it comes to summertime. There's this tradition in Japan that is the day of eating eel in July. So probably you have heard in the news that it is becoming a problem because the Japanese eel is nowadays in the red list of endangered species. So we're working also to campaign on this issue. The same when it comes to other species like octopus or like prawns, overall seafood. In Japan, 70% of that is bought in supermarkets. I'm going to be explaining later on more detail about how we do the campaigning and how we believe that these environmental issues can be addressed and how we can promote change. But for example, that statistic about supermarkets being so relevant for the overfishing issue is important for the work and for the campaign itself. Another campaign that we're working on is what we call the Toxics campaign. We're trying to prevent toxic pollution in our rivers, in our oceans, and in ourselves. Perhaps you haven't heard, but there are also many clothes that actually they are so high in the content of toxics that they have got, that these toxics can be absorbed by the skin, and those toxics can end up in your system. And many of those toxics are actually what is called biopersistent. It means that they can stay in your body pretty much forever. So they are basically chemical materials that can later on become cancer, right? So we don't want to have that in our rivers, we don't want to have that in our oceans, and we don't want to have that in our clothes. So that's part of our main focuses of this campaign. We're trying to push the industry to get away from toxic pollution. Then we have got, of course, the forest campaign. The forests themselves, you may have heard that they are important for us to have oxygen to breathe. But that's not the only relevance for the forests. We have, of course, many species that live in the forests, and they depend on that habitat to live. But the forests are also relevant for climate change. Most of the emissions are actually coming from deforestation. So that's another campaign that we're working on. So those are the 5 main campaigns that Greenpeace globally works on. Now, how do we do it? What is a campaign? So a campaign has got these 4 elements. First of all, we do research. We need to have evidence of the environmental problem that we want to expose. We need people, because we as Greenpeace, we cannot win a campaign alone. So we have to build this momentum. We have to call for individuals to get involved, and we call again for the global communities and the local communities as well to get to know about the problem and take action with us. That's what we call this part about passion and action. We call people to come together with Greenpeace and raise their voices to whomever is behind the environmental problem and push forward the change. So we have got this methodology that we call the ideal methodology. And that is basically the acronym for investigate, document, expose, act, and lobby. What you can see in this image here is the research that we were doing right after the Fukushima disaster. We brought one of our ships to remove water, and we were not allowed to actually go nearby the nuclear power plant. We were actually doing research 60 kilometers away from the nuclear power plant. And we were taking samples of water and of seaweed, and we came to realize that the radiation contamination there was tremendously high, much more higher than what the government was reporting. After that, we had a press conference. We had also the same research on the ground, and we had a press conference, and we released those results. It was early April, right after the disaster. And after that, the government realized that we were actually publishing those results and making it evident that they were lying or hiding facts. And after that, they issued the evacuation order. So it was only because they came to realize that there was an NGO like us spreading that information that they actually took that decision. So basically, that is the element of investigating, documenting, exposing the problem, taking action, and then doing the lobby subsequently with companies, governments, to actually change the situation for the longer term. This is Kuminaido. He is our international executive director. So he's the executive director for the headquarters office that is in Amsterdam. And like I was saying, we as Greenpeace, we cannot win the campaigns alone. So I wanted to share with you this message from him. He's basically saying, when people talk about Greenpeace, we want to move from Greenpeace want this to people saying, I want this with Greenpeace. We want to invite supporters along with us on the journey. We want to mobilize people, power for change. So like I said again, the organization alone is not strong enough. It's not enough to make big governments or big corporations change. We need everybody. We need people to come together with us and actually promote that change. This is Junichi Sato. He's the executive director of Greenpeace Japan. And here's also an important message that I wanted to share with you. He's basically saying, we are living in an era where the impact of policy change is very limited unless it is combined with people power to shift paradigms. We are serious about shaping the world to one that is worthy for future generations to inherit. Then we must also change the hearts and minds of people as part of our mission. So it's kind of the same message that I was saying. We need to do this together. Really, as such, the organization alone cannot do this. Why? Because the reality that we have got now is very unbalanced. Probably you have heard the word polis. This comes from ancient Rome. Yeah, they used to have like the polis, and the polis is made of basically three elements. And those three elements have been identified as the government, civil society, and the market. And the reality that we have got nowadays, especially in a country like Japan, is that the market is more important. The market has got more power. The market is really behind the big decisions that are made. Whereas the government is basically small as well. It doesn't have that much of influence. And it's just listening to the market to accommodate its demands and its needs. And civil society is basically only existing for the purpose of these two. It's a very limited group, and it has got very little influence. So basically what we want to do, we want to shift from that into this, whereby civil society has got a greater degree of influence. The government is there actually listening to what civil society has got to say, and the market itself is just a tool for society to exist, not the opposite. Another way to explain it is, when I talk to people and they say, well, we have got big problems out there. Environmental problems are so big, and I am so small. What can I do, right? But this is an analogy that is created by one of our team members doing what we call mobilization. So mobilization is about engaging people, thousands of people, or even millions of people, to come together to change the situation. So basically, he explains this diagram like this. He's like, this is you, this is one of us, right? Each of us is like really small, just like a fish in the sea. And what they say is that, the small fish gets eaten by the big fish, right? But basically what we're trying to do in NGOs is to change this paradigm and actually get to this. Mm-hmm. So we get people organized in such a way that we become a fish that is bigger than the big bad fish out there. And we get enough power and enough influence to actually change things. So that's essentially what we try to do in Greenpeace in general. I wanted to share with you like a success story of how we do this. So one example is this. Who has eaten the Kit Kat chocolate today? Yeah? In the last year. So the Kit Kat chocolate is very popular, right? But unfortunately, well, this effectively is a story of actually already 5 years ago. We were doing research because basically the biggest, the largest ancient forests that we have on the planet are three. It's the Indonesian forest, the Congo forest, and the Amazon forest. So these are the main three lungs of the planet. So those are the places that we are emphasizing of deforestation campaign. And we were doing research as to how can we stop deforestation. So like I explained before, right? We investigate, we document, we expose, we take action, and we lobby. So this is the investigation stage. We were doing research as to what is behind the deforestation in Indonesia, in the Congo, and in the Amazon. And we came to realize that one of the main causes for deforestation is that they are deforesting like huge areas and creating plantations of what is called palm oil. So they are planting palm oil to create the chocolate. That is an important ingredient in the chocolate. So we did research of what companies were behind that deforestation, and we came to realize that by doing that research, that actually Kit Kat, or Nestlé as such, had contracts with the companies that are doing the deforestation in these countries. So what do? Well, we want these companies to stop doing that, right? So for them to stop doing that, they need to have Kit Kat was actually purchasing palm oil from them to stop doing that. So we wanted to change Nestlé and Kit Kat to actually to demand that that palm oil would come from sustainable sources, not from deforestation, right? So we start that campaign. This is the exposed stage. So we have got that research, we got the evidence of those contracts, and we expose that in a report that looks like this. But that is not enough, because if we do that report, we can send that report to the press, we can send that report to the company itself and talk to them, which we do indeed. But that is not enough for them to change. For them to change, effectively changing, implies huge investments, of course. But for them to actually make that choice, for them what really matters is profit, effectively, right? So on their own will, they will never actually make that change. So what they need is public pressure, and that's what we create. And that is why we expose the problem and take action. So these are pictures. This is actually one of their, it was a press conference by Nestlé as well, and we had this demonstration. So in the middle of the conference, we come to the place and we display this banner. And we're basically saying, give the orangutans a break, right? We have also these public demonstrations. It's basically activists and volunteers from Greenpeace having this dress as orangutans to actually bring that attention to the topic, to bring the media attention into the topic, because we want to create that pressure in the company for them actually to make the decision to change. So instead of Kit Kat, it becomes like the Killer chocolate, right? And here I wanted to share with you a clip that we distributed basically on YouTube. Kit Kat's publicity was basically on that framework, like take a break, have a chocolate, right? So here we have this guy, he's just working, he's bored, he needs to have a break, have a Kit Kat. As you can see, what we're using in that promotional, in that video, we're calling for emotion. You know, what kind of emotions did you feel when you look at that? You felt that it was gross, right? Because the guy is eating something that is actually splitting blood, right? So it connects to your emotional elements, and you say, this is wrong, right? There's something wrong about this. So that's the way we also try to call for the hearts of people to wake up and take action. Because if we show to you, let's go back to the presentation. If you were to look at this report, that actually was like 50 pages or something like that, you will go, well, this is kind of a problem, yeah, but maybe I will not take action, right? Because it probably you wouldn't even read the report because it would be boring, right? So if you're on your day-to-day, regular day of going to work, going back home, or going to school, and you have a lot of homework, really you don't stop to think about these problems. So that's the reason why we do this kind of spoof publicity, to actually, in 3 minutes, go to people's reaction and people's emotion to actually take action. So what happens? Well, we basically build this public momentum, and they did change. They committed to change all of their contracts to make sure that the sources of palm oil are sustainable, are not related with illegal deforestation. So then we also have got, of course, the celebration on that. So we create these kind of images that are spread on social media, and you know, as part of our PR work as well, we recognize that the company has made the effort to change. Because it's not that we are against the company, but we are trying to sort out this environmental problem itself. So that's just an example to show to you how it works in terms of finding the problem, documenting the problem, then calling for people's attention, creating that momentum, and having that change. So what is Japan like? Well, here we have got the same methodology as well. One great example of success story has been Eon. In 2011, we started the research of seafood as to how it was contaminated with radiation. And unfortunately, yes, it was. It had like really high levels of contamination during 2011, during 2012 as well. And we called to the supermarkets to have policies that would call for not having radiation in the fish that they sell to the public. We called 5 big supermarkets here in Japan. We had a petition running as well. You know, people were able to sign in the website this petition. And Eon was the first supermarket to say, we want zero radiation standard. So they established their own systems to actually do research in the fish that they sell to make sure that it was not contaminated with radiation whatsoever. You may have heard about this topic as well. The standard for the government was that 100 becquerels were acceptable in the fish. But Eon went even further and they said zero radiation. So that was really good. That was in mid-2012. But then we didn't stop there, and we continued to campaign and to work with them to actually move forward towards sustainability. That was then, you know, radiation contamination was the main concern during those couple of years. But in the longer term, it's also about fisheries sustainability. So they have also made very serious commitments to start creating policies for seafood sustainability. This is another example. It was work about the unagi, or the eel, the Japanese eel, like I mentioned before. Last year, we started this campaign to also push away supermarkets from selling eel that is endangered. That was also another victory. A number of supermarkets have committed to stop doing that. Then also we have got tuna, but I think for the sake of time I will not elaborate on this one. And like I mentioned before, what we have learned so far in Japan, particularly with this Oceans campaign, is that in order to change government policy, we need to first change big corporations that are influential for the government and are relevant in the country. Like I said, we have come to realize indeed that these corporations are sensitive to what their consumers think. And if enough critical mass of customers ask for a change, they will listen. Yeah, it's like I mentioned before, really, seafood is extremely relevant for Japanese people. Something important here is that we need to be careful as to how we message that. Basically, because the message is not stop eating sushi. The message is ask your supermarket, ask your sushi provider to actually get that fish from sustainable sources. Because if we were to say stop eating sushi, well, you would say why, right? Because it's my part of life. Some people actually have challenged the organization back saying, well, you know what, that is part of Japanese culture. So we want to keep Japanese culture. We want to, continue that for the future generations. So another important lesson that we have learned, particularly in countries like this, is that we need to be careful as to how we display the message. You already mentioned a little bit on this, that the only way to win a campaign, the only way to have permanent social change is by combining these elements. So we need to do comprehensive research and involvement of the market. We need to involve also the government. It has to have that global element. And actually, that's one of the strengths of Greenpeace, that we are not a local small NGO, but we have got this global presence. And we need to involve strongly the civil society. Energy, yeah, we still have time. I will play quickly. With the energy campaign here in Japan, you may be aware of course, of the Fukushima incident. But one of the elements that people are not that aware of is that, if you may have noticed, I call it an incident. I don't call it an accident. This video is basically a testimony that we have got from an engineer. Hopefully you can see that.
で、私は1968年そこに入社して、デザイン部やろうじゃないかということで、日立の大きい日立のですね、親の会社の日立の方から設計部分を、そっちへ移してもらったんですね。そこで、最初に手がけたのが今回爆発した福島第一原発4号ですね。もう若造だったんだけど、グループリーダーですか、そしてトラブルが発生しまして、原子炉圧力容器、製造中に原子炉圧力容器がですね、潰れてしまったんですよ。こう原子炉圧力容器という直径がですね、大体、5メートルから6メートルあります。6メートルぐらいありますかね。で、長さが20メートルぐらいありますけどね。で、これを作るのに大体、2年半、年月で、当時の値段でいうと、まあ、今とはだいぶ値段が違うけども、数十億したと思うんですけども、ですから、まあ、失敗ができないということでしょう。で、その間は東電にも教えない。それからもちろん国にも教えない。これをやると危険だぞということ、これをやると違法、法律に反しているということも分かる。だけれども、じゃあそれに従うと、会社が潰れちゃうかもしれないという問題が。そのぐらい大きくなると、やっぱり企業というのは、安全とか法律を選ばない。で、やっぱり危なくても会社が潰れない、そういう方法を選ぶ。そうしたら日本が躍起になってチェルノブイリ、あれはソ連の技術が下手くそだとか、チェルノブイリは日本の原発と対立しますね。だから日本は安全管理が徹底している、そういうキャンペーンが始まるんですね。新聞で毎日出る。 で、日本は安全に物を作ってるし、安全にメンテナンスもしてるし、だから運転の訓練もしっかりしてる。全然違う。だから、日本でものすごく大変な反対運動が起きたわけだ。それをこう封じ込めていくね、政府とか、電気事業連合会とか、そういうところが始まりました。これは嘘だなと思って、まあ、いっぱいの人が来てる中で、それを言ったんですよ。そうしたら、当然、その人たちはね、私を脅迫してきましたけどね。で、翌日は、やったと。だけど問題はないと。安全上問題ない。それから、国はですね、その私が言った日は、すぐに、そんなことがあったら大変だと、調べなきゃいかんと言ったんですね。だけど翌日日立がですね、認めて、それでやったことを認めて、なおかつ安全ですと、田中の言ってるような危険性はないというふうに言ったらですね、そしたら国もですね、日立がそう言ってることで問題はない。
So as you can see here, we have got the testimony of Tanaka-san, who was involved in the design of one of the pressure holes for the Fukushima reactor. And he said, well, effectively there were issues with it, and were issues that Hitachi itself had the choice to fix. But they made the choice not to. Why? Because what they want is profit, right? How many of you did know that? How many of you did actually know that this was? Okay. So again, like I said before, that is an important or very, very crucial point for us in the campaign, to spread this information. Because, you know, in our day-to-day lives, what do we watch? We watch the news in regular TV, and most of the time they are not necessarily revealing these facts. So, especially when it comes to the energy campaign here in Japan, it has been mostly about doing that research and providing that information. Like I said before, we after the incident happened, and I keep on saying incident because I don't believe that it was an accident itself, it could have been prevented. We had this team going to the place and actually doing that research straight away. And then we released the results of that radiation contamination level. So like I said before, another step of our methodology is to actually expose the problem and to take action. This was an action that we took back in 2011 actually, and that was the board meeting for TEPCO. So we started to create that pressure for them to actually change their minds, and instead of continue investing in nuclear, they would eventually start investing in renewables. Another piece of work that we have is also that we have released these research as to if there was to be an accident, what would be the impact in the surrounding area, and what kind of evacuation plans there are. This was also another demonstration that we did in front of the economics ministry here in Japan. And this was actually more recent. That was last year at the AGM of Toshiba. So it's basically just kind of the same message. Stop doing this gambling in nuclear power plants and start investing in something that is more sure, like renewable energies. This is another tool that we use to spread information. It's what we call infographics. So it's basically just reducing a lot of information, like I said before, a report that can be 50 pages into one little image that can give you the facts in one snapshot. This is another infographic that we have used, especially when Prime Minister Abe started doing international trips and become a promoter for the nuclear power industry. And as part of our campaign also to call for the responsibility for the makers of the nuclear reactors, we had a petition, and that petition was signed by this number of people. So 113,000 people supported this petition. And this is another example of what we do in social media as well. You know, like I said before, us as regular people, we are not aware of the environmental problems sometimes, and we're not aware of how deep they are, right? So somehow we need to engage these people as well. And what another tool that we use for that is this kind of content that we spread in social networks like Facebook. So you can see it's the image of a turtle, and then we have got this text over it, right? So this actually we created when TEPCO was starting to release the radioactive water back in the ocean. This alone was like 10,000 likes because it was really calling for people's attention, and then they got engaged into the campaign. So, especially here in Japan, what are we aiming for? Well, we are working towards a mission for the next vision for the next 6 years, and we want to become a leading organization in Japan that is able to overturn the destructive behaviors of powerful corporations and economic growth of central societies in Asia towards being sustainable and democratic and pacific. Because that's another situation that we have got here in Japan, right? Like, potentially they are moving towards being able to go to war. And we want to do this, like I said before, we cannot do this alone, so it has to be by engaging millions of empowered citizens in Japan and around the world. So that's just to share with you a little bit of, what have we done in Japan and where we're planning to go from now onwards. And like I said before, we are working to mobilize hundreds of thousands of people across Japan, and this means to keep on growing the amount of power and influence that we can have as a civil society. But like I said before, the more resources and capacity we can strategically deploy means the greater impact we can have together. So, this is pretty much what I wanted to share with you today. It's just an introduction and just giving you an idea of what we do in Greenpeace and how we do it. All right.
All right. Oh, plenty of time, yeah. Thank you very much. So I will open up the floor to questions. I suppose if you would like the microphone, I will walk over and hand you the microphone so everybody can hear you. And I'm going to be completely rude and ask the first question myself, since I'm holding the microphone already. If you wouldn't mind, can you just very briefly explain maybe the origins of Greenpeace? Like where and when did it start?
Absolutely. Yeah, I thought that was like a little bit too much detailed, and I thought like it would be better to emphasize the Japanese element.
Well, I'll admit, I used to know, but I forgot.
Yeah, Greenpeace started in 1971. So we have been working for protecting the planet, protecting the environment for over 40 years. And we actually started in Canada, in Vancouver. That's where the organization was created. And the first purpose for the organization was actually to stop the nuclear power of nuclear bomb testing that the US government was carrying out in Alaska. So they thought that, nobody lives there, we can throw nuclear bombs in there without any problem, right? So, yeah, we started campaigning against that, essentially.
Thanks.
So I heard that you started in Mexico and then worked in Amsterdam and then came to Japan. I was wondering what differences you saw in working with Greenpeace in the 3 different countries.
That's a great question. Radical differences. Yeah, one thing that I have come to realize is that really each society can be radically different from one another. I always say that in Mexico, we are raised to have this ability to question authority. When we are in high school, we're always like, the teacher actually tells us explicitly, the teacher does not hold all the truth. You need to do research on your own, you need to find more and more information, and then create your own opinion. That's the way we grow in Mexico, really. We grow able to question authority. And we, in fact, do. So when we do campaigning in Greenpeace, we easily can engage hundreds of thousands of people. When it comes to the Netherlands, it is also different. In the Netherlands, at least half of the population has been a Greenpeace supporter already, Greenpeace donor as such. And the other half has already engaged with Greenpeace as well, doing different activities, whether it can be volunteering or signing a petition. So in the Netherlands, there is a huge, very, very high awareness of environmental problems, and people are looking forward to be more environmentally friendly in their lifestyles. So they tend to like going around in their bicycle. Many people have got actually solar panels in the roof of their houses. Many people actually compensate their CO2 emissions when they travel abroad. So there's a very high level of environmental awareness. When it comes to Japan, the education here in Japan is mostly about obeying. What I have come to see is that, for people to say, okay, well, yeah, that's not what the government is saying. That's what the companies are saying, but that's not necessarily true. And that has been proven with Fukushima incident, right? For how long they were like not necessarily providing all the information as such. You have seen also in this video what happened with the companies. So here in Japan, I don't see the culture of questioning. I see mostly a culture towards just following. And certainly campaigning here is significantly much more difficult. From my own personal assessment, is because of that. Really. Yeah.
So, what do you think about Japanese oil fishing? Oil, you know?
Wait.
Well, yeah. What do you think?
Well, basically that has been also a campaign for Greenpeace. Greenpeace here in Japan, we have been for, actually this September is going to be 25 years. And effectively the focus of Greenpeace Japan changed after the Fukushima incident. Before that, one of the main focuses for Greenpeace Japan was actually whaling. So when it comes to the whaling campaign, what we have come to realize is that it is definitely not scientific research. It's basically just commercial whaling disguised as scientific research. Because effectively what, according to our research, is that actually the whale meat that has been collected from this hunting, supposedly for research purposes, is being sold commercially. So effectively it's one of those programs that is quite sneaky. So yeah, it's a very tricky situation. And it's basically an issue that we will continue campaigning. But effectively, as of now, it is an industry that is dying. Because what is happening is that the demand for whale meat in Japan is going down very, very quickly. Just like a year ago, we were also making research as to what is the stocks of whale meat that they have got that has not been sold. And it's tons and tons of whale meat that is just being refrigerated and nobody's buying it. So it's an industry that nowadays has got a huge deficit. The main whaling ship, the Nishimaru, is also very costly for the Japanese government to keep. And basically what they're doing, they are diverting millions and millions of taxpayers' money to continue funding the whale industry, whereas that money should be going for relieving the people in Fukushima. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the price of solar has fallen dramatically in the last years, right? Since 2008, I think it's fallen just almost to the point where it's rivaling oil and other traditional methods. I, for one, have wanted to install solar, but one of the things that I found is that there don't seem to be many sources of information that tell you, okay, here is the best way to do it. I mean, is there any kind of resource that you would point to if someone is interested in solar, to tell them, okay, what's the cost-benefit analysis? How much would it cost to get it installed? What's the best way to do that? How do you inform people?
Particularly here in Japan, there are not many sources. Most of the solar panels as such tend to be imported because there are companies that have been in the market for longer. So yeah, and also the other problem at this point in time is that it is not enabled for you to have like your own solar panel in your house. I think it tends to be tricky in certain regions of Japan that you need to have special permits as well. But it is possible. So yeah, I could also ask my energy team and we could provide to you like the exact companies that you could be addressing. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any questions? Okay. Yeah, I'll bring my survey.
I'm wondering if you've heard about the solar-powered roadways that they funded through Kickstarter, I think, last month, 2 months ago. And if you've heard of them, I'm wondering if you think they'll ever make it to Japan.
Personally, I would say I hope yes. But normally the problem tends to be investment. And the current investment is being focused on, at least when it comes to the government, it is focused on nuclear. When it comes to private industry, there are a number of like really big industries, for example, the owners of SoftBank, they have been making huge investments in solar here in Japan. So they are starting to create these huge solar farms that are like really kilometers big. I am hoping that these kind of companies will start making those investments as well. But the problem is that when it comes to roads, that tends to be regulated and owned by the government rather than by private companies. So I don't see that happening in the short term. Probably 5 years or so, at least. I think you will need. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't really know very well what's happened in this case, but I remember that Germany declared a no-nuclear policy after Fukushima. And I remember also that people were saying that that's probably not going to work or wouldn't work in Japan and some other countries. So I was just wondering if you could sort of give me an update on that. Is that working out, and is it sustainable? Will they be able to carry that into the long-term future? And would that work in Japan as well?
No, fortunately, the good news is that it is a fact. Germany, opposite to Japan, who actually also made the public declaration, right, of going no nuclear by 2020. In Germany, they have kept the word, and they have been working on installing more and more capacity of renewables. And it's actually going to be by the end of this year that they're going to be reaching 75% of the whole energy that is produced and used in the country coming from renewables. So that's absolute contrast. When it comes to France, for example, France depends 75% from nuclear. And the neighbor country, Germany, is 75% renewables. So definitely Germany is an example for, to follow. Because one of the arguments tends to be like, it's not economically viable, right? But really Germany is one of the most powerful countries in the world. One of the, highest growing economies in the world as well. So when it comes to Japan, our assessment is that it is the same. Should there be the right investment? Should there be the right interest? It is doable. It's just a matter of political willingness to make the right choice.
Yeah, something goes through my head too. Okay, where to start with? Okay, maybe just go a little bit back. I came to Japan the first time, actually, like in 1986 now, and somehow I'm from Germany, so actually at this time the Greens in '85, I think it's not 85, just got they had the first Green minister make it in a local government, not local, state government, and so the Greens became slowly got basically what they choose. We go in the institution. Okay, we have a party. So I don't know. Greenpeace might not be so strong in Japan, in Germany. I'm not so aware actually, because the Greens are relatively strong or have gained. We have a Green foreign minister, and anyway they are present. But of course also they slowly, they become a party, and this kind of and the alternative lifestyle and everything. Okay, it's also first has gone down, and of course the big parties took over. What the Greens went ahead with safe energy and recycling and so on. It's now the big parties, Christian Democrats, however, they all put it on their agenda also. You could say almost we don't need the Greens anymore. Oh, okay, no, that's just joking. But anyway, just go back to '85, '86 when I came, and one thing that just got into my eyes is when there was Wednesday or a certain day of the week when trash collecting day, and everything, whatever, it didn't matter what, newspaper, TVs or toys or everything just got put in front of the street and just carried to Hiroshima or somewhere. Okay, in the meantime, I said, okay, what is going on here in Japan? We were already, started to collecting differently, trash, sorted it out, and Japan is at least 20 years behind one another, behind Germany. Okay, in the meantime, of course, I feel sometimes they have a very precise, they developed an extremely well, for example, the trash collecting system. But sometimes I think, man, what really separates this? Oh, sure, really. They really recycle it, or it ends up somewhere else. It's just burned, or it ends up somewhere else. So I have no really things getting recycled, reused. I have no idea. They really do it, right? It's just a little fake, not so like on a theater. We do, but behind nobody sees what we do. It's just really. No, that's okay. Anyway, in this. Japan has now kind of, this, let's say, certain environmental conscious, which I thought in '86, man, everything is about money and what, no question, what costs the world, as we say. No, okay, I mean, if you want to know TVs, throw the old, buy a new one, and so on. I mean, okay, they learned somehow a certain lesson in the meantime. But still, somehow it's behind. So another side effect. I mean, maybe okay, but I'm a smoker. Sometimes on smoking, sometimes I stop smoking. So, and then I feel suddenly, what's going on here? I mean, you are like now they do it like, as we say in Germany, das Kind mit dem Bade ausschütteln. Maybe you know that. To empty the bathtub with a child. It's a proverb when you overdo certain things. So. You can't actually anymore. Okay, smoking is a little separate. Might be good. Of course, it's good not to smoke. Stop smoking at all. But this policy sometimes then they are strict. Like I mean, you can't smoke 2,000 yen everywhere. But then they said this kind of then back to Fukushima. Yeah, okay. I mean, don't worry about this water. Safety. Don't worry too much. I mean, in small things like. Smoking in the street, and they are now very clear. Like Singapore was on certain. They overdo it in one way in the not so important things, but in the real important things, I don't trust the government or whatever they say. I mean, so yeah. Yeah,
our assessment of the Japanese society is that is indeed filled with certain contradictions. It is a society that has got like different layers, whereby you have got a layer that is at the top. And they have got really the decision makers that have got control over certain things, and they tend to be with that ambitious perspective to basically own the world, right? We have to grow the economy, we have to export nuclear power plants because we have the Japanese pride. But then we also have got the other layer that is the working society. You know, what you call here normally like the salaryman as well. But there is also that general layer of the Japanese society that really has got a lot of environmental awareness. And they really have got these principles of respect for nature, of looking for balance. And we believe that that is the group of society that we can call for and bring together and eventually affect change in Japanese society. So we believe that is mostly about engaging that layer of society that has got that higher level of awareness, that desire for peace, for well-being, for not having toxins in their clothes, for having organic food in their tables, for having the safety of not having a nuclear power plant next to them. So that's the segment of the population that we believe that we can engage for creating change in the society.
Sorry. So you say Greenpeace. So you say Greenpeace is not allowed to research the ocean condition in other plants after the earthquake. So the Japanese government explained why you guys cannot research.
Basically, they did not. It was just refusal. Just basically saying, no, you will not come closer. You will not dock here.
So what kind of governmental change do you want?
Well, basically what we would like to see is, of course, more transparency. It's not the only situation. It has happened before as well. We have tried to grow the ships for other purposes, for the Oceans Campaign as well, to do research as to what is the current status of tuna, what is the current status of other fishes. Actually, we have tried to do research within Japanese waters, and a number of times we have been refused the permission to get the ship into Japanese waters with no explanation behind it. So certainly we face some sort of authority that sometimes does not give any explanation whatsoever, and yeah, it lacks transparency that we have got in many other countries in the world, right? So that's one of the first changes that we would like to see indeed.
I just wanted to ask, my image of Greenpeace has always been as a big environmental organization, but you mentioned that there's also this connection to peace. So I'm wondering if there's any kind of active campaigns or projects related to promoting peace in Japan.
Right. Here in Japan, as such, we have been doing work about the secrecy law. You probably have heard a few months before that a new law has been approved, whereby there is severe punishment for people that actually reveal or pursue to reveal classified information. And classified information can be any kind of information according to whatever the judge decides, right? So it can be from, trying to reveal the financial statements of TEFCO. That can be considered confidential because nowadays TEFCO is part of the government anyway, because the government actually injected taxpayers' money to rescue the company, right? So if a journalist, which probably you have seen in YouTube and in CNN or many other, that we have had a number of journalists coming to Japan to do actually research of what is the real situation around Fukushima. So if that was to be done by a journalist within Japan, that journalist can be sent to jail, basically, with this secrecy law. So we have been working around the secrecy law, coming together with other NGOs to actually, bring citizens' awareness up on the issue, and basically do public comments to oppose that law. But effectively, the law passed. Nowadays, they are trying to make those changes to the constitution to actually enable Japan to have military as such, which at the moment is not allowed. But they come to realize that that is a bit complex, so they are trying to start new laws that are about the right to self-defense as a whole country. So they are trying to find like an alternative way to still build military. So that's another topic in which we are going to continue working with our NGOs as well in Japan. Thank you.
We have a question over here. You don't have to use it, but it's your choice.
Anyway, thank you very much for a very interesting. I just have a question. Earlier you said that in 2016 we would have a choice in which electric company we use.
Yes.
Could you perhaps clarify on what choices you might have at that time?
At the moment, we have got information that there are over 100 companies that could be interested in taking the customers that everybody knows that TEPCO is going to be losing. So apparently there are going to be quite a few alternatives in the market. We don't know yet what that is going to look like by 2016, but at this point in time, we know that there are a number of providers that are very keen to get those customers once the liberalization comes.
So when you are campaigning for that, you would help in providing information to these companies.
Basically, yes.
I don't think many people do know that such options.
Certainly. Certainly. Yeah, and actually this was just approved a couple of days ago. If you look at the Greenpeace website, you can also read the blog entry where we describe the details as to why it has been approved. So.
About how many of those companies use renewable energy?
Yeah, our assessment is that currently it's about 30% of them. Yeah, not all of them could be renewables.
I have actually no idea of really wind power or tidal power or thermal power. I mean, how many of these power plants or how they exist, or I don't know. I mean, Germany seems to be, okay, they say sometimes goes like almost like against windmills. There are too many now. I went to France. How many are there? 10 or 5? I mean, are they actually? They're producing already a large amount of energy, so electric energy, or not? I have no idea actually.
Especially in Japan, that capacity is installed, but it's not significant, not that much. If you want to look at the detail, you can go to the Greenpeace Japan website, that is in Japanese, or you can go to the Greenpeace International website and search something that we call Energy Revolution. That is a global report that we compiled, looking at the different energy sources that are being used currently in the world, in various countries, and in that report it is explicitly explained what is the participation of all those different sources of energy.
Okay. I hate to pose this in terms of what is the value of continuing to breathe, but since there is a focus on what is the value of these resources we're pulling out of the earth, I read that there was a recent study that said that the value of protecting the resources that we have, in other words, the natural resources of the planet, rank up in, I think the number reached was something like 142 or 143 trillion dollars per year. Is there any emphasis on that? I mean, because we look at, okay, we could mine that mountain, or we could drill for that oil in that Arctic region, and we would get so many billions of dollars. There doesn't seem to be any attention being paid to how much are we losing by damaging these same resources.
Right.
Is there any campaign or information source that basically deals with on those grounds, on what the value of protecting these resources is?
Yeah, we have done that campaigning as well, especially when it comes like special moments, like in 2008, when there was this big global economic crisis. There was also the rescue of the banks, and it was billions in certain countries. In other countries, it was even trillions that were used to rescue the banks. So we had a number of reports and also posts in social media and on different websites to expose what it compares, how it compares, and effectively it was ridiculous. Like the amount of saving a bank could have saved the environment easily, right? So yeah, that is, that's another angle that we have also explored. Another very interesting angle that we have been exploring is what it means in terms of energy invested and energy that we get back. And we have come to realize that nowadays, especially when it comes to getting oil from the Arctic, for example, the amount of energy that is invested in getting that oil is more than the energy that we're going to get from that oil. So effectively, going and getting oil from the Arctic is not a business in that perspective. So overall, in energetic terms, we're actually wasting resources by going to get that. So we also try to avoid that angle. But in the end, like I said before, it's like we try to move different audiences with the kind of message that they can receive. So when it comes that we're talking to academics, then we can talk in those terms. When it comes that we're talking to, like day-to-day people, probably they will not necessarily be able to relate to that message, right? So we try to use tactics like the ones that I mentioned before.
Are there any more questions? Oh, there we go.
Thank you for today. I feel a little bit afraid about the Greenpeace. So today I know something will. So, but why choose this way? What is the most good point about the Greenpeace to you?
Yeah, I mean, the point that you just raised before, that you felt afraid of Greenpeace, that's something that we tend to face relatively often, particularly in the Japanese society. Because like I said before, the overall underlying cultural principle is do not raise your voice, right? There is the saying, how does it go? Like, you don't want to be the nail that gets nailed, don't stand up, or watch you with get nailed. So there's a little bit of that principle, right? So we get that quite often. But I would say, when it comes to Greenpeace, what I always say that is our main strength compared to other environmental organizations. There are many other global environmental organizations like WWF, right? But they are also doing campaigning in terms of climate change. And I think the difference between those organizations and Greenpeace is that we have got independence, first of all. So we're independent from corporations, from governments, because we are funded only by individuals. So we're able to raise our voices and to point out where the environmental problems are coming from. And I think the second strength is that we take action. And remember that our main principle is non-violent direct action. Non-violent is coming basically from the practices that Mahatma Gandhi used to achieve the independence of India. You remember that the principle was not to take any violence against the British government, but actually just stand in a position of being peaceful at all times. So that is the principle that we use ourselves as Greenpeace. So we use non-violent direct action. Direct action basically means that we go to the source of the problem and expose the problem. So we have got also that ability to actually take action and go there to the actual scene and get people to see what they otherwise would not see. You know, like I was showing before the images of the ship being in the middle of the Arctic. You need to have that infrastructure to go to the Arctic and to actually show people how the problems are there, right? So basically when it comes to Greenpeace, I think that is one of our main strengths, that we have got that independence and that we do things taking non-violent direct action. So we expose the problems like other organizations cannot do so.
Maybe one final question in the front here.
Yeah, it's the timing. I don't know how much time. Okay, yeah. I mean, just okay. An example. I mean, where I live in Hachioji, Takao, that's sort of this mountain, Takao-san, what they call the house mountain of Tokyo. Okay, there has been a grassroots movement for more than 20 years against a tunnel that has been drilled through the Takao, through this Takao mountain for environmental or for saves nature and certain species who are living there. And the part is the tunnel was made as a part of the ring road, the highway ring road around Tokyo, which is probably not completely finished right now. Okay, but at last the feeling is, I mean, that they were fighting for 20 years, going on protests to stop this tunnel to build. But at last, I don't know, a year or 2 years ago, the final judgment, and some court stopped it and it continued going on to court again, or actually also a very peaceful organization fights the tunnel. But my feeling was that at last, when it comes to the final, the courts in Japan, they're not on the side of the people. At last, they feel they are somehow on the side of the government. So that's, the courts are of no big help. So I don't know. It's maybe the experience of Greenpeace. Courts don't expect the courts will help you right now.
Certainly, we have had that experience as well. Like in other countries, we will use the courts as well, and we will use legal resources to actually promote a demand against the government or against an industry as citizens to stop a certain environmental problem. Here in Japan, certainly we don't resort to that strategy because we know that it ends up like that. Nevertheless, there are a number of lawyers very active here in Japan, especially when it comes to the nuclear power plants. And recently they won a case. So they were able, as citizens, to have the court saying no to the nuclear power plant restart because the evacuation plans were not good enough. So there are also positive cases whereby we also get the courts deciding on the side of the citizens. And anyway, even the judges, they are human beings. So effectively, you know, it's that case of reaching also to that human side and getting them to open their mind, getting a broader perspective, and actually make decisions for the greater good. So, yeah.
Let's give a big round of applause to Magali Reyes-Henkel.
Thank you very much on behalf of Lakeland College for a really, really interesting and enlightening lecture. And so everybody, thank you for coming. If you are visiting us from outside the school, make sure that you're on our email list and you'll receive all the notifications for future lectures. And our next one is Wednesday, July 16th. It's called The Invisible Hand That Builds the Future. And the topic is going to be the evolution of technology, starting with the printing press onward into the future. The presenter is going to be Kenneth McLean, who has taught media classes here at LCJ and at other institutions around Tokyo. So please join us on Wednesday, July 16th. And thank you and have a good evening.
If I may give a closing message.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just as a closing message, like I said before, the only way we can save the planet, the only way we can save the environment is together. So basically, here I was presenting a little bit of the methodology as how we do it in Greenpeace. But like I said before, we cannot do that without you. So my final closing message could be, please get involved, please get information. There are many ways that you can get involved with Greenpeace. You don't have to be a supporter, you don't have to be a financial donor, you could be a volunteer, or you could just be a Facebook subscriber that gets information now and then of what we're doing and what is going on. So you can check out our website, check out our YouTube channel, check out our Facebook page, and then you can get all this information and all these resources with the latest news. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.